don't know about you guys, but I'm definitely starting to feel that it's fall. Because it is so cold in my house. This past couple of days it's been a little cool, but it hasn't been terrible. I mean, I've had to start wearing like long sleeve shirts, jeans, that kind of stuff. But today, it is so cold in the house. I have a long sleeve shirt and I've got my cozy little sweater on top and I'm still cold. How about you guys? I know where my family's from, it's really hot there still. But what about you guys? Are you feeling the cold? Is it starting to look like fall or like it skipped fall and is into winter where you're at? Here it's very rainy now, so it definitely feels like it's getting to be winter time, fall and winter time. It's getting cold and rainy and wet, and definitely the season of cold weather and snow possibly to come. I'd love to hear how the weather is going for you and if you are ready and prepared for any winter weather that comes your way. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with today's class. Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. Today we are talking about chapters 11 through 15 of The Pawn of Prophecy. Still continuing with the Belgariad series this week. Obviously, I haven't forgotten about Mercy or any of my other types of videos. Those will come up. I just thought since we are starting this book anew that we would do a couple episodes to get it going, a couple classes, before moving on and going back to mixing things up. So I hope that you are enjoying this book if you are reading it and following along. Hope that you are enjoying. So let's go ahead and get started with our recap as always. So if you guys remember the last set that we talked about, they ended kind of on a cliffhanger-ish, not really totally a cliffhanger, but kind of an intense moment where they realize they're not going to be able to get away with traveling the way they have been and are going to have to indeed meet the Sindarin king. So we start off with them traveling to the king. And when they get there, the king has them dressed and bathed and taken care of before he even greets them. And when he does greet them, he acts like they are old friends, especially Mr. Wolf and Pole. He greets them especially with friendship and as if he's met them before, which confuses Garon, of course. And through that greeting, through the meeting of this king, we finally are starting to see all of the characters' kind of hidden identities being revealed. And the king tells them that he called them there because all of the kings in the area need to be counseled with Belgariad. They all want his counsel, which doesn't make Belgariad or Mr. Wolf very happy. He is not wanting to be counseling these kings when he was hot on the trail, finally, of the thief. But he decides that obviously he's going to have to do this since all of them are worried about the stolen object that the thief is carrying. So he continues with the Sindarin king and the party to go over to Cherik and have a meeting with all the kings and give them counsel. So they go ahead and do that. All the kings, of course, are concerned and they have many, many meetings. Garon is not really able to go to a lot of them. Pole kind of sidesteps him and pushes him away, even though he tries to get in on these meetings to learn more. But then Garon, Barak, and some of the other men decide to go on a boar hunt. They think that would be fun while Belgariad and Pole are meeting with the kings and they're not needed. So while they're out on this boar hunt, Garon ends up overhearing this talk between this noble, who we don't know, and this green hooded figure that Garon has seen a couple times and has had a suspicion is shady, especially when he sees him with a guy who he believes to be Asherak. And they're talking about how the Lord has paid this man to get into the castle and overhear the conversation that Mr. Wolf is having with the kings. and obviously at this moment he's not doing very well, and the Lord is not happy and saying, no, you need to go back there and do what I've paid you to do. So then, before he can tell anybody any of this, the boar ends up coming, and Garon tries his best to kill the boar. He does a pretty good job in the fact that he does stab the boar, but it doesn't kill him in one blow. So the boar continues to attack Garon, only for Barak to save him. But something's interesting is that there's some kind of bear mixed in with the identity of Garon with Barak when Garon sees him. He can tell it's Barak, but there's some bear or some kind of bearish figure that's kind of merging with Barak, and he doesn't understand what he's seeing. But obviously something did happen in the fact that Barak talks to Pul and says that there was something that he couldn't stop. So that's where we ended it at this point. So once again, we are leaving it at an interesting place. Obviously something has happened, and we will continue to read forward and see what that exact thing is. So the first thing I wanted to talk to everybody about is the revealed identities, because in this set of chapters we have not only revealed the identities of Pul and Mr. Wolf, we also have Barak and Silk revealed their true identities, and we have some kind of mysterious kind of identity thing happening with Garon, especially with the priest, or we don't know if she's really a priest, but Marchi seems to know Garon and knows something about his identity that he doesn't know. So there's a lot of hidden identities being brought out into the open in this section. So I'd just like to go over them and talk about what we expected, what we didn't expect, who they are, what this means, that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and start with the obvious. Pul is indeed Pulgara. Aunt Pul is indeed Pulgara. Of course, this is not unexpected. Eddings did have this set up for us from the very start. We talked about this all the way in the beginning of the first class that we did, how all of these non-subtle hints were being left for us as a reader to make these connections that obviously Aunt Pul is Pulgara. And now we just have proof, and now we are able to see what's going to happen with the identities, with the characters that didn't know who she was, like Garon and Dernick. So she is indeed who we thought she was, but now we get to see how this revelation is going to affect her relationship with those that did not know. And again, another obvious one is that Mr. Wolf is indeed Belgariad. So again, we already had this presented to us in the beginning. It was already obvious based on the hints and the prologue that Eddings gave us, so it's not really a surprise, it's just a confirmation. And once again, this will just be something that will determine how relationships change and grow from this point, because now we have this revelation, and the same characters who didn't know about Pul didn't know about Mr. Wolf. So now it's going to be this new identity for them to come to terms with, and we're going to see how this progresses and how the relationship progresses because of it. And then we have a couple unexpected ones. Like, we knew we didn't truly know who these people were, we just didn't realize that they had an identity that was so important, or at least I didn't remember exactly who these characters were. I did, as I've said before, I haven't read this book series in quite a while, so some of it is coming back to me, but this one I remembered that there was some other backstory to them. I just didn't remember exactly what it was, so even for me, I was a little bit like, oh, that's right, like, this is kind of unexpected, and for those of you who haven't read it are probably like, oh, I didn't expect it to be this kind of backstory, unless you did guess it, in which case I would love to hear your comments on how you came up with realizing that both Silk and Barak are royalty. So let's start with Silk. Silk is a prince of Drasnia, and his real name is Keldar. So his name isn't Silk at all, which is not totally surprising. I mean, Silk isn't much of a name, not saying that it couldn't be his name, but it seems more like an alias. And we actually find out that he is indeed part of the royal line. So he doesn't really want to be in it, and he's dreadfully doesn't want to be king. But he is part of the royal line, and is very smart and very traveled, actually, for being part of the royal line. Usually you would think of him having to be more in Drasnia and more in his own jurisdiction, learning about that kind of stuff. But since he's not really in line for the throne, he's able to go out and do the other things that he wants to, and is much more manipulative and sneaky than you would think of. With like merchant stuff and breaking and entering and being a spy than you would think a prince would be. So that's kind of interesting and seems very out of character and yet very right for his character, if you know what I mean. And then we have Barak, who is the Earl of Trelheim, however you say it. And so even though he wasn't necessarily born, I believe we have a time or that was mentioned that he was appointed as Earl. So I'm not sure, at least for me, it's still not sure exactly what, if he was born that way or he was born in line that became the Earl, exactly how that worked out for him. But he is also part of now the nobility because he is an Earl and has relations and high in the royalty. So both of them are connected to very important people. They are very important people in this world, and so they definitely are more than what they seemed in the beginning. Again, if you kind of guessed this right away, let me know how you thought it up, because I didn't necessarily see any signs that said, hey, these two are nobility. Obviously, that was very clear that they knew Pole and they knew Mr. Wolf, and there was some kind of backstory there, and they were kind of secretive about who they were, but I would never have guessed that exactly that they were nobility. And I feel like as we go forward, we're going to learn even more about these characters and why they are the ones that are on this journey versus other characters. So with these revealed identities, let's go ahead and talk a bit about the reactions to those identities. We've got Garon's reaction. So he's got two very different reactions for the two different groups of people. We've got Wolf and Pole, and we've got Silk and Barak. For Silk and Barak, he accepts their identities, no problem. He's not in denial. He doesn't deny their claims of who they are. It's clear who they are based on how they interact with the other nobilities that all know him, or know them. Pardon me. And it's very easy, I think, for him to accept this because it's not challenging any beliefs. It just shows that he didn't know exactly who they are. And he wasn't expecting them to be nobility either, considering how they act and the way that they're traveling with him. It just wasn't really in his brain to think that way. He's very coming to terms easily, though, in the scheme of things, to their true identities and accepts it no problem, and doesn't think less of them, doesn't think differently of them. It's just now part of who they are to Garon. Gives him a deeper understanding, makes him feel closer and connected to them. But for Pole and Mr. Wolf, he believes that they also go by these other names, but he is completely denying any way or form or shape of them actually being the Polgara and the Belgariad. He believes still 100% that there's no way that these two people actually exist, and that his Aunt Pole and his Mr. Wolf are those two people. He is in completely in denial. Does not want to even foster the thought that that's true. And part of him, I think, recognizes that it is true in the fact that he is very much realizing that his Aunt Pole isn't really his aunt. Obviously not because she has this other identity, because he's been told she can't be his aunt, and just he's finally accepted that she can't be his aunt by blood at this point, and is making him very angry at her, makes him really not understand who he is or what any of it means. He's really pushing back on that front. So part of him, I feel like, is accepting the fact that they are who they are. But then there's this part that's his active brain saying, they can't be real, magic's not real, the myth is just a myth, like none of it is actually real. Except for apparently the orb, which is apparently okay to be real to him. But Polgara and Belgariad cannot really be the Polgara and the Belgariad, and that's just improbable, impossible. For whatever reason, they're going by the same names, but they're not those people. So he's very much denying their true identity, denying who they are, what they're saying they are, what the kings are saying they are, who Silk and Barak say they are. Even the fact that Polgara makes this rose, this living rose, out of nothing. He believes it must have been some kind of trick in order to, do this posturing that they have in the nobility. He believes maybe she already knew about it and tucked away a rose or something like that she could then present in a sneaky fashion. He does not believe that she could have for a second made the rose out of nothing. He is completely not accepting it. And we are going to see how that goes as we progress through the story, as we progress through the last bit of our book to the next one. We're just going to have to find out on whether he will accept it or not, because this is a very big thing for him in his relationship with Polgara and Belgariad. We can already see that his connection with Polgara right now is suffering. And instead of being more mature and talking to her about it, or Belgariad about it, he's just acting out and being rebellious instead, and it's hurting Polgara, though Polgara also is not sitting down and talking with Geron and actually having a real conversation about things with him or telling him anything. So I feel like both of them are at fault in this. I'd love to know your opinion about how Pol is handling Geron and Geron is handling Pol down below, since this is a very important relationship that is very centered on throughout so far this first book, and we will see how that goes and progresses through the next books. And then the other person who didn't know who they were was Durnik. So I wanted to talk about his reaction, especially in comparison to Geron's, because we really don't see Durnik's reaction at all. Literally none. He just seems that Durnik has accepted who they are very quickly. He talks about them with Silk. And these are the kind of moments where we kind of see him acknowledging who they are and who they're presenting themselves to be. But we don't know if he believes it. We don't know if he's in denial like Geron. We don't know if that's changed his opinion in any way, shape, or form. We really get very minimal reaction from Durnik to these identities. We obviously know that Durnik is very, very fond of Pol. So has that changed? Is he feeling betrayed? Or what else? We don't really see inside Durnik very much at this point for these identity reveals. He seems to be taking it all in stride and has no problems, but that might not necessarily be the case. So it's kind of interesting compared to Geron's, who we see his reaction, we see who he is, how this is now making him feel like he doesn't even know who he is himself. And we get a lot of insight on how this is affecting Geron. And then we have Durnik, who we're like, so what do you think? And it's a blank screen there. You don't really get any information on what he thinks or how he feels or how it's changed his relationship with Polgara, especially since he is romantically interested in her. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the romantic relationships that have been presented in this set of chapters. So let's go ahead and start with the ones that are noticed by Geron, and these are both ones that are longing for the other party. So the first one actually was set up a while ago, back at the very first set of chapters, for Dernick wanting Pol and being interested in Pol. So I thought I would incorporate that one as well. It's not from this set of chapters, but as we talked about just a second ago, obviously with Polgara's true identity being revealed, this might change. We haven't seen so far Dernick's reactions or Dernick's wants or anything really about Dernick at this point, but because he has been in love with her, as Geron has pointed out to her and she is ignored, it's clear that he cares about her and the fact that he wants to follow her anywhere and won't go back to Falder's farm unless Pol goes there as well. That we really see that this love, this longing for Pol has driven Dernick to do a lot of the choices that he's had. Not saying that he's being coerced into anything or that he feels like he's doing something stupid or making stupid choices, but he's going on this journey specifically for Pol and a little bit for Geron since he is fond of Geron. But a lot for Pol is what keeps him in this group on this journey, especially when he is just as clueless as Geron. No one explains anything to him. No one asked him if he wanted to come on this journey. He's just kind of following and doing the best that he can to help Pol and to protect her and to do what is necessary. Even at this time that he's with the kings and the nobility, and he's very uncomfortable. He's removing himself enough from the situation that he can be more comfortable, but is really there for her and a little bit of Geron. So he's kind of, his longing and his hope and his care for Pol is what has brought him on this journey. So I wanted to mention him, even though it wasn't specifically brought up in this set of chapters per se. It is really relevant to just Dernick's whole presence to begin with. So I feel like that's an important relationship to note, because him wanting a romantic relationship with Pol is what keeps him going and keeps him following her. And then we've got Silk, who Geron mentions wants his aunt and the king's wife. And it's kind of funny that Geron brings this up, and Dernick is obviously very scandalized and is like, how could you say this? Don't breathe a word of that to anybody. But it is totally obvious to the reader when Silk is talking to her that he very much enjoys her presence and is flirting with her a bit. And it seems in many ways that she is flirting back with her nephew. So Queen Porine is possibly interested in her nephew. It's not clear exactly if she is just very familiar with him and it's more of a teasing on her part, or if it actually is a romantic longing, but you can kind of get the sense that Silk definitely is interested in her based on his flirtatious kind of interaction with her, and Geron picks on it like that. I think it's so funny that Geron is the one that's like, he's not the person you would think would catch on to these kind of things. You'd think that he'd be more obtuse about it, especially being a little kid, when he was a little kid, and now that he's just, a young teen, that he wouldn't really be interested in like picking up these kind of subtle cues, and especially with him being so naive of the outer world, since he lived mostly on Falder's farm for most of his life. It's not like he has a lot of expertise with like the world in general, but he's the one that picks up these cues of like these men that are really longing for a relationship with these women, like Dernick with Aunt Pol and Silk with his aunt. We'll have to see how that relationship with Silk and Queen Porine progresses. Obviously, it would be a very scandalous one if it actually happened, since he would be courting not only his uncle's wife, but also the king's wife. And yeah, so that is much more of a risky longing than Dernick for Aunt Pole, because even though with Aunt Pole it might not work out, it's a little less deadly to be interested in her. The only thing is that you'd have to make sure you just don't tick Pole off, because then she might kill you. But with Silk, he could be in serious trouble for being interested in his uncle and the king's wife. So we'll see how that progresses, and those are the unrequited at this point loves that we have noticed that have been built and been presented to us. And then we have the unwanted romantic relationships, and there is one main one that has been presented to us. It's very interesting, and that is Barak with his wife, Meryl. I feel really bad for Barak. Barak, we see him a little bit more in these chapters. We're getting to know him a little bit better, get a little bit more of him in the forefront. And it's too bad that he has such a wife that is so conniving and just mean and just unwanting of him. And since she can't do anything about it, she just treats him poorly, and treats him poorly in front of everybody, not just to him personally, like, you know, behind closed doors when they're in private or anything, but in front of anybody and everybody. So everybody and anybody knows exactly how Barak feels about his wife, how his wife is treating him, how pretty much almost emotionally abusive Meryl is to him, and he can't do much about it. And because his relationship with his wife is so toxic, he cannot be with his 2 daughters very much, and is constantly away. So it's sad for him, it's sad for his kids who don't get to have their father around. It's sad for the whole situation, and obviously Meryl is the one that's making things difficult on purpose. And it's also sad because Barak really cared about her and wanted her and thought she was something special when he first knew her before getting married, and it ended up being not what he had hoped, and she ended up being the person he didn't realize that she was. So it's a very sad relationship, a very sad story, especially because it's the kind of tale that it's a bad toxic relationship, and it's one that he can't get out of, and he can't be with somebody else. He can't find somebody else that would be good to him. And then we've got the one relationship that seems happy. Obviously, we don't know all behind the scenes of every character and their situation, but it seems like Queen Lila and King Fulrich are very happy together. Queen Lila is very worried about him traveling, and they have many kids together, and they just both seem like they have a very happy relationship and are a very happy couple together. So it's really nice to have a little bit of something that shows that there is some good in this world, there is some happiness, and that some of these couples, especially with the nobility, can work out well. And I thought it's just nice to bring them up in the fact that it's building a little bit of the world and some of the characters that are of interest to us, but also just something nice to see and to recognize is that there is some happiness and some couples out there that are making it work and doing a good job of living life the best that they can. If you thought of anything else to mention on the romantic relationships that are developed in this story, especially in these chapters, go ahead and let me know down below. I would love to hear it, or any other comments you have based on these couples or these people and how their relationships might progress in the future. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some world building. We talked about it some in the last class, and then we have some now in this section. Since it's much more of a, I don't want to say it's a simple story, but it's a little bit more simplistic in reading and in how fast it goes compared to, say, Dragonlance. So we have a lot more world building back to back, a little bit more in a condensed space versus Dragonlance, which was a little bit more spread out throughout the novels. So we're going to see world building happening continuously through these books. So we learn have more world building first with a little bit more history. So we've had some history happening in the previous chapters, especially with the mythology and all that. But in this one, we've got the Sindarin king history and how it became that the Sindarin king was elected, and that is the first king and only king that has ever been elected. And according to Silk, that's not a good way for someone to get a king, for it to be voted on and all that. That's his opinion. We don't actually see really why he explains that decision, but he definitely says it and is saying it on purpose because of the company that he has with him, to try and ruffle some feathers. So, but in that, the story that he tells and all that does lead to more history building, and in which case more world building. We get to see more of what this world is, what the people live in there, and we find out that Garon has lived in a place with an elected leadership, and that is a unique quality to have versus the other ones that are born to it, and it's traveling down the line. And then, because now that we have traveled out of Sindaria and we're in Cherik, we see some of the Cherik culture and how it is different than Sindarian culture. So, especially in these chapters, we really see how the Cherik women are more bold than the Sindarian women. For example, we have the woman, the maid or whatever, who comes up to Dernig and is pretty much propositioning him for sex publicly in front of Garon, all up in his business, trying to seduce him to come with her at some point, or meet up with her and get it on with her. Very bold, very little being hidden in the context of what she was saying. Very obviously propositioning him, which obviously Dernig did not take well and thought was very rude and outlandish that a woman would be so bold and just propositioning him like that. Especially since he is interested in Pole. Obviously he did not, at least that we know of, he did not go, and he did not seem very impressed with the idea of that being propositioned of him. So obviously the Sindarian ways are not quite so bold and out in the open as it was for this experience with him and this woman. And we see also that the woman, or not the woman, but the girl that Garon meets and talks to is very, very bold. She also was propositioning Garon to have sex with her, even if it was a little more subtle. And she steals a kiss from him after he punches the guy in the nose, and wants him to chase her as she runs away, which Barak and Silk know right away what is happening, and Garon misses it completely, goes right over his head. He doesn't realize at all what it is meant, that run was meant to be. Not necessarily saying that he would have followed her anyway, but she obviously, as a teenager and a younger girl, is been brought up to be more bolder and upfront with those kind of desires. So you can really see how the Sindarian culture and the culture that Cherik has at this point is very different when it comes to women and sex, and how bold it is seen to be polite to be bold or not bold in that way. And then we also see the difference between the view of Sindaria about working hard, working on, especially on the farm. You're constantly working, there's always stuff that needs to be done, people are always going, there's really hardly any days off, because when you work on a farm, you have to take care of the farm animals, you have to pick any of the vegetables and fruits and all that are ripe and are ready to be picked and harvested. There is very little downtime and rest time and days off for people. But the guards at the castle are just like milling around, playing dice games, hanging out. Like, there's not much for them to do. So we see the difference in like the workload and what is expected of, like, whether you're supposed to be hardworking or not. it's a little bit skewed, especially with like, the other nobility that are just wandering around, doing whatever, and not having, to do a hard day's work. And Durnick definitely makes a comment by saying, why are all these people doing nothing? That seems weird. And why would you pay these people to just be sitting around playing dice games? And so it's definitely a difference of culture between the Cherrick people and the Sindarian people, and especially in Balder's Farm versus the royalty and the nobility. So even, obviously, Cherrick and Sindaria have different cultures, but even just like, the regular classes versus the upper noble class has a difference of culture as well. And then we see Marty. She is a seer that, according to Brock, is not very good and should just keep her mouth shut, and he gets very angry with her. But either way, she does exist, and at this point, it seems, whether they are accepted or not, that people who claim to be seers, and possibly Marty is also a seer for real, we will find out as she keeps talking about people's doom. We will see what happens, but we are setting up the world building to be like, hey, this is a world that can facilitate seers and facilitate this kind of person, and somebody who isn't necessarily magic but does have supernatural capabilities. That would not be what is normally everybody else can do. So obviously Margie is a very interesting character. We wonder why Brock gets so mad at her and is fending her away if she really doesn't mean anything. We have how she is commenting to Garon that is very interesting. So we are building the world as well by having these different kind of characters in it. And I will apologize. I can't tell if you guys can hear the TV that's happening out in the living room. My roommates are out there and it's loud for me, but hopefully it's not so loud for you. If so, I'm very sorry. This time my roommates are actually home instead of out, so I can't totally control what's happening out there. Okay, and then so we've set up that there's such a thing as seers in this world, and we also have set up in these set of chapters, one more thing is that the difference between cultures as well, and the fact that Drasnia seems to, at least based on the interaction between Silk and Queen Porine, have more equality between males and females. Since the queens are being sent away and it's the kings that are talking with Belgariad and Pull, and it's like, this is the guy talk, the women go do their knitting and embroidery, and Queen Porine mentions how that would never be the case in Drasnia, and that she's got to go with the queens, but because that is just how it works here, and that is how it is seen to be done there, versus how she would normally be interacting and be involved in if they were in Drasnia. So again, quite a few points of world building, quite a few things being brought up and brought forth for us to realize what kind of place this world is and the different cultures that live there. If you have anything that I missed, any other world building, anything like that you would like to comment on or have a discussion about, of course, as always, comment down below, or however else you want to reach me. I would love, love, love to have a discussion with you. And let's go ahead and finish up with the nitty gritty. I actually have quite a few things that I want to bring up and have us keep in mind as we move forward through the rest of this particular book. The first thing is kind of obvious, that we need to keep in mind whatever happened with Barak. He and Paul obviously know about the significance of whatever it was, and they kind of know what it means, but we don't at this point. So we need to keep in mind that we are still waiting for the answer of what exactly happened with Barak and what it means. Maybe we'll find out before the end of this book. Maybe we'll have to wait until the next book to find out. We're going to have to see how that goes. But it is important to keep in mind, since it is acknowledged as something that Garon experienced and that is being hidden from him. We have that Margie claimed Garon as a Lord of Lords. Obviously, again, we have the background knowledge from the prologue and the hints that are not so subtly dropped by Eddings, along with Wolf, Mr. Wolf being Belgariad and Pol being Polgara, that Garon is important and in the line of Riven Kings. So obviously that is something to do with that. We are going to see exactly what it means and when that is going to come up, and when Garon is going to understand what being a Lord of Lord means in the future. So we're going to have to see how that goes and plays out. We have the stolen artifact, aka the orb, and the fact that it could raise the accursed one, which sounds like obviously Torak is the person that they don't want raised. That is pretty clear in the context of things, but it's important to keep this in mind because this means a couple of different things. One, obviously the orb can raise him, which is exactly what is being said. That's what we should keep in mind, first of all. But second, if the accursed one needs to be raised, what is he at right now? How has he been put to rest? How has he been, whatever it is, trapped, put in slumber, or whatever else, that he would be raised from? There's many possibilities that could be. And trapped, whatever. Where is he at right now? Obviously we thought, or at least I thought, that he was a bit more active in the world in Meloria, and he just was not able to, because of the orb, be over on the side that all the Chariot descendants are on. But at this point it seems like maybe he's in some kind of hiding, in some kind of sleep, in some kind of whatever, and they are worried about him being awoken or risen or whatever else. So let's keep that in mind and see where that's going to go. And then we have to find out still who the Lord is that is consorting with the Murgos and paying to find out the king's conversation. Who exactly is he? What is he? What is his relation? Why is he working with the enemy, since he doesn't seem to be classified as an enemy? Obviously, Barak mentions that there are no Murgos or any Melorians or anything like that in the Cherik area. So who is this Lord, and why is he working with the enemy and wanting to know about the conversation happening in the castle? Especially seems to be working with the enemy if the guy in the cloak was also talking to Asherak. And last but not least, we have this inner voice and this instinct that Garon has. We've seen all the way back from the first chapters, continuing to guide Garon, and we still have no answers as to what instinct that is, how he has it, what it means. We really don't know much about anything at this point. So we need to keep that in mind, see where that instinct and voice leads him, and find out how that's going to affect the future. Okay, that is everything for today's class. I hope you enjoyed. As always, you are welcome to contact me for any questions, comments, or concerns. I would love to have a discussion with you as always. You can comment down below on this video if there's something specific for these chapters that you'd like to talk about. You can also contact me on Twitter with @fantasyfiction1, or you are welcome to do the same on the Facebook page, which is also /fantasyfiction1. Pretty easy, no matter which way you go, it's the same tagline. You can also contact me through email, or if you'd like more content from me in a written form, that is, I do have a blog and a website where you can also contact me on there. It's fantasyfictionfanatics.net. I have a whole bunch of content over there. I have recommendations, book reviews. I've got, TV, talking about TV and TV shows, fantasy related stuff. I've got, terminology and different personal anecdotes on fantasy for me and having discussions with other people. Deliberations I have about different kinds of concepts of fantasy, all that good stuff. If you'd like to check any of that out, it's going to be over there. And of course, I do have contact form over there as well if you want to contact me that way. So plenty of avenues to contact me. I really truly hope that you do. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion, as well as to hear if there's anything that you would like to see in future classes. Okay, for the next class that's on Pawn of Prophecy, we are going to be finishing up this particular novel. So book 1 is just about done. Go ahead and please read chapters 16 all the way through to the end. It's going to be 6 chapters, I believe, but it's the last chapter I think is pretty short if I remember correctly. It's page, at least on my version, which is this one, it's page 206 to the end. I hope that you are continuing to enjoy this story. I think it's one of the best high fantasies there is out there, so I really hope that you are enjoying it. If you've never tried it before, I hope that it is a new story that is intriguing to you and wanting you to read all 5 books. Okay, I guess I will see you guys next time. I'll talk to you later. Bye.